trying to provoke anybody to do anything particular? Were you trying to provoke or trying to get people to do things?
Yes.
Tell us what.
Think. Use your head.
Possible and follow the social distancing rules.
So, if we were so well prepared, particularly with testing, why is it that we are still behind the game on testing? Why is it we were so behind the game on PPE? Why is it that we had to go cap in hand, begging manufacturers to make ventilators? Why is it that actually, despite the fact that in 2016 we had a whole pandemic conference with all the government, all the health department people, in which we actually tested as a random exercise exactly what we're now going through, and it drew a number of conclusions, and then you as Health Secretary get up in the House of Commons in January as it begins to blow up and say we are completely prepared? Why is it that the reality is that we turned out to be so underprepared?
That's not true. And
that is true.
Well, it's not, and I'm about to...
But it's plainly true, isn't it? You haven't had enough PPE, you haven't got enough tests, you didn't have enough ventilators. What was it you were prepared for?
Piers, I think you're slightly misjudging the public mood, because I've come on
I don't give a damn about the public mood. I care about you answering my questions.
I've come on this programme to answer the questions, and I was just about to do that. You asked me about 4 questions in that series, and I'm going to now go through each one of them in turn, and I'd really appreciate it if you didn't interrupt me, okay? So the first thing is about preparations. We were one of the best prepared countries in the world, well prepared. For instance, with a large stockpile of PPE, the challenge has been that this is a new virus and it has a different impact than any virus that's ever been seen before. So, for instance, with the PPE stockpile that we had, one of the parts of it that we didn't have much of, because previous viruses haven't needed it, is gowns, full-length gowns as opposed to aprons, and that's where we've had one of the biggest challenges in PPE. In terms of testing, as I said back then in January in the House of Commons that you just played, we were one of the first countries in the world to develop a test. We've ramped up that test. We went from 2,000 at the start of March to 10,000 at the end of March. And we are on the trajectory to get capacity to 100,000 a day by the end of this month. It's been an absolutely mammoth effort. You talked about the companies who I've invited in to help to make sure we've got NHS capacity and ventilators. That's brilliant, Piers. We're using all of the capacity of this country to get the capacity.
Just to interrupt on that one point on ventilators. Is it true, according to the Financial Times yesterday, that the instructions you gave to manufacturers were for ventilators that would last several hours, and that as a result, they are useless and cannot be used?
No. And the good thing about...
That's not true? The FT is lying?
It's not true.
So it's not true that any of the ventilators that you got made to specifications given by your department, it's not true that any got made to a specification that has rendered them useless for anyone that needs one for more than a few hours, which actually is most people?
I'm going to keep answering the questions, Piers, and I would appreciate the ability to do so. That's why I come on the programme.
You just said something wasn't true that the FT said was true, and it quoted to people at the sharp end of this actual issue. I'm just interested whether you think the FT is lying.
Well, I was about to answer that before you interrupted me again. This is a national emergency. People want to hear the answers to your questions rather than you just asking another...
Stop playing that game with me, Mr. Hancock. With the greatest of respect to you, you're just buying yourself a bit of time. And the reality is, when you got up and said that you were properly prepared, actually, I would admire you more if you just admitted you weren't properly prepared, rather like Emmanuel Macron has admitted that they weren't prepared. But your resolute refusal to concede that you've made any mistakes here, that grates with me, and I think that also misjudges the public mood, to quote your phrase.
Yes, I'm now going to answer the previous question and then that question, and you're not going to interrupt me, OK? Let me speak, because that is the purpose of...
You don't actually run this show, but I will actually let you answer the questions. Go on.
You just interrupted me again.
You don't decide how I do an interview, but off you go.
No, but I'll decide what I say as Health Secretary.
Sure, and I'll challenge it. You do your job and I'll do mine.
Well, if you would do your job, then you would let me answer.
I'm doing my job. I'm asking you questions. You answer them.
Right. I will answer these questions, and if you interrupt me again, I will just keep talking, so
Okay.
don't. Thank you. Right, the first thing is on the FT point. There are many different types of ventilator. There are complicated ventilators that are the highest spec. They do use for what's called invasive ventilation. And there are also ventilators needed for a lower level of ventilation for people who are less ill. And we are building both types of ventilator. And I think it's a very positive project. And the most important thing about the ventilator project is that the core goal that we've had throughout this of making sure the NHS capacity is bigger than the demand on the NHS, which some people said was impossible, has been met throughout. And so I pay tribute to the private companies that have been involved in the ventilator project as much as I do the NHS, who've done so much work to expand their capacity. That's on the FT point. On the broader point about preparedness, which you ask about, of course, whilst we were well prepared, of course, because it's a new virus, other things have come up, and we have worked night and day.
On March the 11th, on the very day that the World Health Organization announced this was a global pandemic, on the day that we had seen in Italy catastrophic scenes of the health service being run over, on this programme, I challenged the wisdom of the government allowing mass events like the Cheltenham Festival to be going ahead, like the Liverpool Atletico Madrid game to go ahead, where thousands of Atletico Madrid fans who were not allowed to go to their own stadium in Madrid because they had been closed were allowed to come to one of our stadiums and mix with Liverpool fans, and where bands like Stereophonics played big concerts, that this was a government advisory that they could do all this. With the benefit of hindsight, was that a mistake?
Well, I think with the benefit of hindsight, that we took the judgments on the measures that we took at the right time, and the fact that we have successfully got to a peak and the NHS has been able to expand, so it's always been available. So it hasn't, unlike what we saw, for instance, in Italy and Lombardy with those terrible and very sad scenes right at the start of the European outbreak. I think that part has been.
When you talk about success, Health Secretary, we now have the 5th highest death rate in the world. If you include the likely care home deaths, I think we move to 3rd in the world. You have a strange, different view of what success looks like to me. The care home explosion is happening. It is extremely dangerous for everyone that is there. Our death toll is rocketing by nearly 1,000 a day. We were warned yesterday by Chris Whitty to expect even bigger numbers as this week goes on. This hasn't been, by any definition, a success, has it?
Well, I was specifically referring to the fact that we have managed to expand the NHS so that everybody has been able to get the NHS treatment that they need. And of course, when you look at the international comparisons, you also do need to take into account the size of the country. Now, I admire some places in the world that have managed to keep things lower. For instance, in Germany, where my friend Jens Spahn, the health minister there, has taken quite a similar path to us, different in some ways. They started in a different place with different capabilities.
Germany, as you know, has a massively lower death rate than we do. And look,
3,254 deaths to our 12,868.
And the reason everybody believes is mass testing, which we haven't been doing, but you say we're prepared. Let me just ask you this question. In New Zealand, the leader there, they've had about 4 deaths in New Zealand. They locked down their borders, they shut their airports. Yes, they're a smaller country. Yes, it's different density of population and so on. But 4 against 12,500, it's a pretty massive difference. The Prime Minister there, Jacinda Ardern, has just announced that she and her cabinet are taking a 20% pay cut to show solidarity with everybody else who's going through a hard time. You've been very vocal about wanting footballers to step up, which they now have. Will you, as Health Secretary, now be taking the lead in the government and taking a 20% pay cut, like your New Zealand counterparts, and urging your cabinet colleagues to do the same?
Well, I am really pleased that the footballers are making contribution to charity, just as many of us do, me included. And everybody needs to do their bit. And the way I'm doing my bit is by working every hour God sends.
Well, every health minister's doing that around the world. But my question to you is, will you be taking a pay cut, as you urge footballers to do, and as the government in New Zealand is doing? Yes or no?
Well, I'm not proposing to do that. What I am proposing to do is work every hour that there is.
But we'd expect you to do that with respect, Mr. Hancock. But you were, as I say, very censorious of footballers for reasons I didn't really understand, given they're just one group of well-paid people in the country.
So
you're a well-paid person. Some of your cabinet are multi-millionaires. It might be quite nice if you follow the lead of the New Zealand government and take a pay cut. That's what I'm suggesting. But you say you won't do that.
The point with the footballers is that they were asked... I was asked a question about footballers and I answered
and you didn't hesitate to nail them. But when I ask you the same question about whether you're going to chip in, you say you're going to chip in with hard work, but not with a pay cut.